Start now. Good evening in Indonesia and good morning in the US. I'm David Merrill, president of USINDO, the US Indonesia Society. Welcome to today's open forum on renewable energy in Indonesia, opportunities and challenges to meet climate goals, held in cooperation with the Southeast Asia Forum of the Stimson Center. In January 2021, the United States rejoined the Paris Agreement and followed up with an ambitious pledge to reach net zero carbon emission by 2050. Similarly, Indonesia targets to reach net zero emission by 2060 and to boost renewable energy share in Indonesia's energy mix. Serious bilateral discussions are increasing between the two governments on working together toward these ends. Because of the importance of public understanding on these issues and the increasing alignment of US-Indonesia interests on climate change and the environment, USINDO is holding a three-part public open forum series on how the US and Indonesia can cooperate on these issues. The first today is in Indonesia's renewable energy potential and challenges in utilizing and maximizing it. This builds on a 10-day program on comparative international experience in renewable energy that USINDO held in April by Zoom with the Indonesian Parliament's Energy Committee. Later this summer, we plan a program on climate finance and unlocking investment opportunities to reduce emissions. And then in the fall, we will cover sustainable agriculture, new agricultural technology, and agricultural venture capital and their potential to reduce climate change. The time is very right for these programs. They fit in with both governments' new agendas, and USINDO sees this as our responsibility as an NGO to help enrich the public engagement dimension of the US-Indonesia strategic partnership. As evidence of the great public interest, over 360 people have registered for today's event. Today, our distinguished expert panel will discuss Indonesia's plans to reach its climate goals through the best ways to enhance Indonesia's rich renewable energy potential, a gradually reduced role for coal over time, and increased bilateral and multilateral partnerships to attract climate-centered investments. Our four distinguished speakers, and I'm mentioning them in the order they will speak, are Dr. Kelly Sims Gallagher, Academic Dean of the renowned Fletcher School at Tufts University and Director of Fletcher's Climate Policy Lab. Kelly will provide us the international context of renewable energy and policy implications for Indonesia. Pak Satya Yudha, a member of the President's new or recently established National Energy Council, which established Indonesia's energy goals for the next decade, will be our second speaker. Dr. Dadan Kusdiana, Director General for New and Renewable Energy at the Ministry of Energy and Mineral Resources, ESDM. The central operational point for these issues is our distinguished third speaker. And Dr. Darmawan Prasodjo, Deputy President Director of the State Electricity Company of Indonesia, PLN, the crucial state company for implementing renewable energy goals while meeting Indonesia's electricity needs, is our close-up speaker. We are honored to have all of you participating today. Each panelist will speak for 8 to 10 minutes, followed by a period for questions, answers, and discussion after they are all finished. Listeners, please submit your questions through the Q&A box, not the chat feature, and please include your full name and organization. Now let's begin. Dr. Kelly Gallagher is Academic Dean and Professor of Energy and Environmental Policy at the Fletcher School. She directs the Climate Policy Lab and the Center for International Environment and Resource Policy at Fletcher. She served in the second term of the Obama administration as a senior policy advisor in the White House Office of Science and Technology Policy and as senior China advisor in the Special Envoy for Climate Change Office at the US State Department, among many, many other distinguished positions. Dr. Gallagher, please.
Thank you so much, Ambassador Merrill. It's an honor to be here with such a distinguished panel. I'm going to be sharing my screen and showing some slides. And my task is to talk about renewable energy policy around the world and draw lessons for Indonesia. And I very much look forward to the discussion during this morning or this evening session, so we can talk about what is appropriate renewable energy policy in the context of Indonesia. So just to put a few facts and figures on the table to ground our discussion, I have here Indonesia, the United States, China, India, and Germany. And I'm going to present very, very short case studies of each of these countries in terms of how they have developed renewable energy policy and the outcomes from that policy. And I want to draw your attention to a few key points here. The first is that when you compare Indonesia to China and India, in terms of gross national income per capita, Indonesia comes in the middle in between China and India. But in energy use, well, also in energy use per capita, but in renewable energy use, Indonesia comes in third. So it has the lowest renewable energy consumption today compared with India and China. Likewise, it also has the lowest greenhouse gas emissions, including if you include land use change. But I would note that all of these countries are in the top 10 in terms of global emissions. So just a brief sort of reminder, because I'm sure most of the listeners are familiar with these policy tools. I just wanted to present a short typology of policy tools that are often utilized to promote renewables. The first is fiscal, and here typical policy tools are tax credits, loan guarantees, feed-in tariffs. The second type is regulatory policy, and here typical approaches are renewable portfolio standards, where a certain percentage of renewable energy is required to be achieved by utilities, or conversely, a clean energy standard or a non-fossil standard. The third type is market-based policy, and here examples would include carbon pricing, emissions trading, and competitive auctions. Innovation policy has been an important component of some countries' policies, and that can include public or government investments into research, development, and demonstration, human capital formation, so either direct investments in developing, scientists and engineers, or recruiting overseas talent into your country. And also support for demonstration projects and even early deployment. And the final category I want to highlight is green industrial policy, which is, I think, not a new type of policy, but one that has been become much more of in vogue, I guess, in the wake of the pandemic and the economic costs, as we think about this notion of how to build back better, as President Biden likes to say. So let me begin with a quick case study of Germany's renewable energy law of 2000. This initiated Germany's Energiewende, which is the energy transition that aims to phase out nuclear energy, reduce energy imports, reduce carbon emissions, and address climate change. The main policy tool, though many were utilized, was a feed-in tariff policy. And I think it's fair to say that Germany pioneered the feed-in tariff policy for renewables around the world. They made a lot of achievements. Power generation from non-hydro renewable energy increased from 6% in 2000 to 41% in 2019. The feed-in tariff advantage is that it provides a very clear price signal to operators and power producers, very low transaction costs because it's a straightforward policy, and it led to very rapid deployment of renewables. The downside to a feed-in tariff is that it's an expensive policy for the public to bear, or whoever is paying for the feed-in tariff. And so many countries have moved away from feed-in tariffs and towards competitive auctions so that the tariff levels are set at the lowest possible level. Moving on to China. China also established a feed-in tariff for wind in 2009 and a feed-in tariff for solar PV in 2011. It establishes new renewable, but they call them non-fossil portfolio standards. So that includes nuclear and hydro every 5 years, and sets ever higher targets in the context of their 5-year plans. They provided a lot of financing for manufacturers through the China Development Bank and its other state-owned banks. It created a lot of policy certainty. The Renewable Energy Law of China provided mandatory grid access, cost sharing for renewable energy, and a renewable portfolio standard of 15% renewables by 2020, which was exceeded. So as you can see, power generation from non-hydro renewables has increased from 7.5% in 2007 to 15.3% in 2019. Very stable policy signals, low transaction costs, lots of attention to green industrial policies. And as we all know, Chinese manufacturers now dominate global markets in renewable energy. And this is really the consequence of 20 years of effort. China also found the feed-in tariff to be a very expensive subsidy over time, and recently eliminated the feed-in tariff in favor of a new emissions trading system for the power sector. So looking at India, its Electricity Act of 2003 provided the legal basis for the establishment of a renewable portfolio standard. It also required priority grid access for renewable energy. And the National Solar Mission, established in 2010, introduced a national renewable energy competitive auctions policy that has led to some of the lowest prices for renewable energy around the world. You can see here that power generation from non-hydro renewables increased from 5.5% in 2006 to 10% in 2019. The advantages have been low prices, very rapid deployment, and a low policy cost burden for the government. And the cons have been higher transaction costs, adventurous bidding, and maybe construction of low quality renewable energy assets. And there has been much weaker industrial policy outcomes. And finally, I'll conclude with the United States, which has used 3 primary policy tools: renewable portfolio standards at the state level, in other words, not at the national or federal level, production and investment tax credits at the federal level, and a loan guarantee program at the federal level that was actually established in the context of the last economic recession in 2009. You can see that non-hydro renewables went from 2% in 2001 to 16% of net electricity generation in 2020. For all non-fossil electricity, the United States is now at 43%. And you can see in the graph on the right, for this year, in terms of new electricity generation capacity that's under construction, it's almost all renewable energy, a little bit of gas. The advantages has been that well, first let me say the lack of a national RPS, this is really more of a con, created a fragmented market, but the production and investment tax credits have proven very popular with power developers, and the loan guarantee program also helped them. So the fiscal policy has been the most effective. But the downside has been that the US industry experienced many boom and bust cycles when the tax credits were set to expire before they were renewed by Congress. So not a stable policy. I just wanted to show you the diversity of the different renewable energy standards at the state level. Maybe too small for many of you to see, but the point of this is to show that almost all of the United States is in fact covered by a renewable portfolio standard. But the standards vary state by state, which creates a fragmented market that manufacturers have to respond to. And I also wanted to note that last year in 2019, US renewable energy consumption surpassed coal for the first time in 130 years. And this was indeed, I think, a very symbolic transition from coal to renewables. So I draw four main policy implications for Indonesia. The first is that no single policy is likely to be adequate, and that a mix of regulatory, fiscal, innovation, and green industrial policies will be important. Clear and predictable policies will help the renewable energy market to grow, leading to financial investment, both domestic and international, job creation, and economic benefit. And that finally, removal of contradictory policies is key so that consistent signals are provided to the marketplace. And with that, I'll conclude my remarks. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Kelly. We're now going to invite Satya Yudha. I'll just say a brief word about him. Satya Yudha is a member of Indonesia's National Energy Council, DEN, appointed by President Jokowi. DEN is a national independent institution chaired by the president, tasked to formulate national energy policies and goals and supervise their implementation. Before joining DEN, Satya served as deputy chairman of DPR's Committee 1 on Foreign Affairs and Defense. Prior to that, deputy chairman of DPR Committee 7 on Energy and the Environment. So he's very well placed on these issues. Satya, please.
Well, thank you very much, David, for your introductory remarks about me and distinguished panelists. Of course, Dr. Kelly, Pak Darmawan, also Pak Dadan, and I saw here Pak Haris, Director for Geothermals, and also distinguished participants. Very good evening. And I thank you very much for inviting me to this prestigious event. I'd like to give you a kind of macro policy perspective about the energy sectors in Indonesia. Yeah, right. Okay, the next slide. Thank you. Next slide, please. Yeah. This is the outline that I'm going to talk about tonight. And as you may know, that Indonesia is committed on the international commitment. At least there are two things which is quite important. One is sustainable development goals, as you may know, goals number 7 and also number 13. Number 7 is more on the affordable and clean energy, and 13 on the climate actions. And from those, goals, basically we are following what's so-called the target in 2030. It's been mentioned as well on the our commitment on Paris agreements. So on the target 2030, we ensure that universal access to affordable, reliable, and modern energy services. We increase substantially the share of renewables in the energy global mix. We're promoting the energy efficiency, strengthen the international cooperations, and also to expand infrastructure and improve technology. This is kind of our target in 2030. And if you look at what so-called the nationally determined contributions as part of the Paris Agreement, that we are, of course, aiming to reduce our emissions up to 29%. Using the business as usual, and 41% if using the international aid by 2030. So 2030 is basically the first NDC that we developed that we're trying to commit with, and also a lot of things that need to be done from the energy sector. If we look at the compositions of our national determined contribution, is around 38% occupied by the energy sectors. So we have to be able to reduce up to 314 CO2 emissions, 314 million ton of the CO2 emissions, or 398 million ton CO2 emission by 2030 if we are using the international aid, which is 41%. And we also, in here, in our national energy planning, that we also commit to reduce our, to improve our renewables contribution on energy mix is around 23% by 2025. So there are two big commitments, right? NDC is set target by 2030, while on the national energy planning, we also using 2025 as well as 2050. And the next slide, if you look at the trend that we are heading, if you look at today and around 2010, 2020, if you look at from the energy consumption, is energy per capita, is from electricity standpoint, is only 650 kilowatt hours. So it's pretty low. I'm using the 2010 condition, and primary energy consumption is only 110 million ton oil equivalent. If we are moving to 2030, we are aiming to improve our electricity per capita is up to 2,500 kilowatt hours. And primary energy consumption is around 500 million ton oil equivalents, which is a lot of renewables, and also using the efficient of coal and gas for domestic consumptions. And if you are going forward until 2050, where we are heading to the Indonesia becoming industrial based economy, so we are aiming to have a electricity per capita up to 7,000 kilowatt hours, and the primary energy consumption around 1,100 million ton oil equivalents. So here the plan that we are aiming, from 2020 up to 2050. But again, when we are talking about the net zero emissions, bear in mind that Indonesia has not been in the face of the peak emission. We have to be able to forecast carefully, where that Indonesia is going to have a peak emissions. The next slide. So this is the Indonesian nationally determined contribution, like I mentioned earlier, that our NDCs consists of 5 factors here. So the energy sectors occupy around 38%, waste and IPPU is industry, agriculture, forestry. So once we are talking about the reduction of the emissions, it doesn't really only rely on the energy sectors, but we have to be able to count the other factors, like waste, IPPU, agriculture, forestry. with the totals of the reduction of emission, if we are using the business as usual, around 2,869 million ton of the CO2 emissions. If you look at from what we are doing at the moment, if we are targeting in 2020 is around 64.4 million ton of CO2. Yeah, the target is only 58, so we are above the target. If you look at the realization in 2020, and what happened in 2020 is we promoting the renewable energy. So we are in the right tracks. We are reducing our emission around 34.3 million ton, and energy conservations also contributing around 12.9 ton, and clean technology power plant is 5.9 ton, and fuel switching 8.4 million ton, and reclamation post mining is 2.8 million ton. So in total is 64.4 million ton CO2 reduction. That is quite quite good in terms of the achievement so far. And I like here for the next slide to give you a thoughts about how do we move toward the net zero emissions. And here it shows that if you look at the developed country like United States, Japan, EU, they are all already experienced under the peak emissions. Like Japan, they experienced in 2004, in US 2007, and EU in 1979, and UK in 1973. So they are experienced under the peak emission. So that's why now it's quite easy for them to forecast about the net zero emission afterward. While the low-income country like Indonesia, that we trying to to forecast our peak emissions in the future, even though there are not certain number at the moment, but we are in the middle of the calculating using the best assumption that 2030 is going to be emissions. So from there, I can go to the plan for Indonesia to have a net zero emission by 2060, and we are like to accelerate it in 2050 if possible. So with a lot of effort need to be done, because of their ambitions to reduce our emissions and even to the net zero emission by 2060 or 2050. So the next slide. This is like what I just mentioned earlier, the experience in the developed country, and looking at the peak emissions what they have. 2007 for US, EU 1979, Japan 2004, and also UK 1973. So please, next slide. Next slide. Yeah. So if you look at our strategy here, once that we are able to forecast our peak emissions, then very easy for Indonesia to again to calculate when the exact year for the net zero emissions. A lot of things need to be done, of course, in order for us to be able to forecast the peak emissions. The next slide is this is grand strategy of the energy that has been presented to the president, and we got approval from him, even though there is no such a presidential decree being issued. But I want to show you to here that we are also aiming to increase our crude production by 1 million barrel by 2030. We also increase the capacity of the refinery, of a fuel refinery, and optimizing the utilization of natural gas, and also accelerating the use of renewable energy on the power sectors, using the solar power plant, optimizing biofuel, and also biodiesels. But here, we also like to increase the domestic, the LPG productions, increase the construction of the city gas, and development of the dimethyl ether, methanol, fertilizer, and syngas production. And also, we also trying to build the more the infrastructure on gas and LNG receiving terminal afterwards, and also building the electricity electricity transmission, distribution, using the smart grid and grid power plant, and build small-scale nuclear power plant. We also put all in the grand strategy energy that is need to be achieved at least by 2030. So the next slides, if you look at from the potential of resources that we have from wave, from the geothermals, we have the resource on the geothermals around 23.9 gigawatt. The installed capacity at the moment is only 2,000 gigawatt. So a lot of potential that need to be developed on the geothermal, bioenergy, on wind, hydro, as well as on the solar. So solar here, total capacity for the resources is around 207.8 gigawatt, while the installed capacity is pretty low. It's only 0.07% if compared with the resources what we do have. So the next slide, this is a government plan for the development of the renewables. There are hydro, solar, wind, nuclears, bioenergy, and also geothermals. So I'd like to jump to the slide number 14, because this is more on the challenge side, that the energy transformations will require a lot of funding. If you look at from the transformation that we are heading, from fossil fuel based to be more cleaner energy, even though the fossil fuel is still there, but more cleaner fossil. So a lot of energy transformation it requires funding. The intermittent renewable energy generation to operate properly, it requires a high additional investment, and also the network system is need to be developed to absorb the electricity from new and renewable energy power plant. It's still limited at the moment, so it would require additional investment to upgrade power system reliability and flexibility. I do believe that Darmawan is going to talk about later on. And renewable energy model business is considered less attractive at the moment with high rates. As the result, bank and financial institutions are less interested in providing funding with long tenors and low interest. So now we are, in the middle of developing the presidential decree on the renewables. Hopefully, by issuing that presidential decree, will attract more investment on the renewable sectors. And also the lack of availability of low-cost technology that suit the local conditions. That's something that probably U.S. could help, in terms of development of the technology. And of course, the last point that which is quite important is requires policy support of the national and subnational and international level, including the public transportations. That's my last slide. I'd like to, give you an illustrations about the low carbon energy transition strategy from the fossil goes to the fossil plus technology. It requires fossil technology, which is more cleaner, using the carbon capture, storage, and utilization, and net sinks, and also developing the green energy, which is using the primary energy substitutions, biofuels, with the co-firing with all the power plants. Futures that now still so fossil energy conservations, and also additional capacity of the existing new and renewable energy power plants. And also, if you look at those activity, it has to be supported by smart energy and smart grid and energy conservations. Of course, development the electric vehicle is one of the options, and developing the battery that we are now in the middle of forming the company, Pertamina, and also Inalums, in order to build the lithium. On those scenarios, basically, in order for us to cope the energy security, the energy independency, and also sustainable development, and also low carbon climate and resilience. I think those are my slide, David, that I could share to the audience this morning and this evening, of course, in recent time. So hopefully,
Thank you.
We could discuss even more on the question and answer if there is.
Thank you, Satya, for this great background and forecast. Now we want to move to Dr. Dadan Kusdiana, Director General of the New and Renewable Energy at the Ministry of Energy and Mineral Resources. Dr. Dadan leads the ministry's policy planning and implementation for geothermal, bioenergy, and other new and renewable energy, as well as energy conservation. And he's assisted by his chief of geothermal. Previously, Dr. Dadan served as the Energy Ministry's head of research and development and energy expert staff. Dr. Dadan, please. And unmute yourself.
Thank you. Thank you, Ambassador David, Yang terhormat Pak Satya, Pak Darmawan, and also distinguished ladies and gentlemen, the participants, the panelists. We'd like to continue the talk, the speech, the discussion. I think Pak Satya has mentioned many things that provide me the background, the good background. So I would like to start directly with the program of renewable energy in the of the government of Indonesia, in particular in the Ministry of Energy and Mineral Resources. We have a very good support, of course, from the United States so far. We have a continuing program with USAID, and we have now so-called the program we call SINAR. SINAR, the program that will be supporting us, accelerating the program of renewable energy and also for the greenhouse gas emission reductions. We have also actually recently having the task force of climate. So this is the quite big task force on energy and climate and also in blended finance. So hopefully this will be also supporting the Indonesia in accelerating the renewable energy as well as also the climate. So I would like to start with providing you with our programs. So I think some number has been mentioned earlier by Pak Satya, and those numbers actually fit with our program here. So we know already that, or at least I would like to mention that now Indonesia actually is in the stage of, we are in the excessive supply of electricity, which most of them comes from the coal. Renewable energy share is around 11.2% by primary energy mix in last year, and we are going to go to 23% in 2025. So how then we can achieve this under this situation? We have more electricity on the grid, but at the same time, we need more renewable energy to be put into the grid and also to the tank. What we do is the first is that we do to substitute the fuel. So what we do is substitution the fuel, for example, by putting biodiesel into the diesel fuel. We use coal firing. I think Pak Darmawan will be mentioning later on in the program probably. So by this, we don't need to increase or to add more capacity into the grid, but we can increase the share of renewable energy for the implementation. So then the other strategy is also to substitute the diesel fuel. I mean the diesel generator being operated by PLN, and this gradually transform into the gas power plant and also to renewable energy power plant. We have some program for increasing the share of renewable energy development. We have rooftop photovoltaic programs. We have solar farm program. This is for large scale of the solar photovoltaic implementation, and also the floating solar photovoltaic. We have the first project, 145 megawatts here in the West Java, and we will see the COD later by next year. We start already with the wind project. We have already 2 large scale of wind implementation in Sulawesi Island with a total of 150 megawatt. We are the country rich with biomass and waste, of course, since we are in the tropical country with base of agricultural economics. So together with US, I think we are also rich in terms of geothermal. We are the second potential as well as also the second in terms of the implementation. So we put all together with hydro and again with nuclear some days. We have the planning in the green strategy as being informed by Pak Satya somewhere around 2040, and we are also pursuing to have more clean and emission-free fuel, for example, hydrogen and also battery as the energy carrier for this. So of course we need the support cooperation from others in terms of the interconnection of the smart grids, since we are in the country of the archipelagos. We have many islands. We have also many potential on renewable energy, which is spread out all of the country, and this will need the good infrastructure, including the grid. Next. So I'll mention one by one here. This is the fossil primary energy conversion. This is done by PLN, by Pak Darmawan. So at the first phase, this will be located in 58 locations with the total capacity of 307 megawatt. It will be directly converted diesel generator power plant into the renewable energy available in that location. We are the country, or we are the only country pushing 30% of biodiesel into the diesel fuel on the national level. So this year we are targeting to have around 9.2 million of biodiesel. We start the co-firing and also we start to use the municipal solid waste being co-firing also in the coal power fire plant. Next. The other program is, as I mentioned earlier, we have at least 3 programs on solar. So we put this is the first priority of the program on renewable energy, including from the solar rooftop program, large scale program, and also floating solar PV program, as I mentioned earlier. In total, I think we have the potential of 28 gigawatt of the floating solar power plant program. And by this implementation, we can have a good economic and competitive price compared with the other renewable energy and also compare with the fossil-based generation power plant. So for geothermal, there are some initiatives already coming from the government to support the government drilling. So we provide the state budget to support this, and also with the support of some other banks, World Bank and other institutions, we can have also the similar program to reduce the risk during the exploration. We are in the process to do a synergy between a state-owned company, because there are at least 3 state-owned companies working on geothermal. We have PLN, Pertamina, also we have Geodipa on this part. We have many potential to develop the small-scale power plant. The first will be Indian with 10 megawatt, and we will see how the project performs on this. Next. So in relation with the regulation, Pak Satya mentioned already that we are finalizing the regulation on tariff. We have also prepared the presidential regulation on carbon trading or carbon pricing or carbon economy. As I saw in the slide from Dr. Kelly, that this will be also something that important for us, will be provide more contribution into the accelerating of renewable energy. We are also waiting for the draft of the law on renewable energy. This is an initiative from the legislative, and we have some others also being prepared in the ministry. For example, for the regulation on rooftop and also the regulation on the conversion. Next. So these are some incentives that I mentioned some already. we have the schemes for public-private partnership in addition to private development. So a private also welcome to work together with the government to have more projects, and of course with the support also from the government. There are some state-owned companies, including PLN, Pertamina, and others, working on renewable energy in particular. And for incentives, I think most of the possible incentive has been provided by the government since many years back. We have tax holiday, 5% reduction of income tax for 6 years. There are also facilitates for the import duty tax holiday, and also mini tax holiday for the small investment here. Some are being facilitated by the government, some others also, I think this is support from other multilateral agencies. For example, funding for the SDG Indonesia 1 and subsidized loans through the PTSMI. We have also the green bond on Sukuk in addition to the funding. For geothermal, we have financing for geothermal sector infrastructure. We have fund to support the geothermal exploration upstream development project, and also geothermal resource risk mitigation. Those are actually the last second are being operated by PTSMI under Ministry of Finance. Next. My last slide, this is in addition to the one that being mentioned comprehensively by Pak Satya. Of course, we are supporting also the increase of local content here. So we are trying to have more industry here in the country, in particular for solar, for hydro, and also the investment. At least for 10 years, the draft of RUPTR, the draft of the procurement plan of PLN will provide somewhere around probably 25, 30 or 40 billion US dollar investment for 10 years. So as being criticized also by Dr. Kelly that we are of course from time to time trying to provide more and better regulation. So we are updating the policy framework. We put more database for renewable energy. So this will be provided more basic information for the investor before they decide to go to the investment. So I think that's all, Dr. Pak David.
Thank you.
From my side, thank you.
Thank you so much, Pak Dadan. Now we turn to our cleanup speaker, one that's right on the cutting edge at PLN, Dr. Darmawan Prasodjo. He's Deputy President Director of the State Electricity Company, PLN, since 2019. For 4 years previously, he was Deputy Chief of Staff at the Presidential Staff Office with responsibility for energy and infrastructure policy and strategy. He played a principal role in designing the energy policies of President Jokowi for the 2014 presidential campaign and was recently entrusted to write the president's official biography. Dr. Prasodjo obtained his bachelor's and master's in computer science and his doctorate degree in applied economics from Texas A&M, and conducted postdoctoral study in energy economics at Duke. Dr. Prasodjo, thank you for speaking at USINDO again. We very much look forward to your remarks. We have about 3 or 4 questions, which we want to save room at the end. Thank you. Please proceed, Dr. Darmawan.
Good evening from Jakarta, and good morning for the United States. Fellow panelists, Pak Dadan Kusdiana, Director General for the Renewable Energy, Pak Satya, Widya, Yudha, Member of National Energy Councils, Dr. Kelly Gallagher, and then Ambassador Merrill and all the audience here. It's an honor to be here. And let me start that I'm delighted to speak here today because I think we are here with one purpose of all, to ensure that the next generation is having a better future than our current generations. How are we going to do it? We're going to do it by reducing CO2 emission and prevent further damage. And here I'm to convey that I'm very proud. I'm pleased to inform that PLN is among the first 6 Asian electricity players who made commitment to net zero aspirations by 2060. So we're going to phase out our fossil fuel plants and gradually increasing the renewable energy portion. The size of the electricity sector today is roughly 300 terawatt hour. And assuming that the electricity demand growth is roughly 4.6% annual growth, then by 2060, the size of the industry electricity sector is roughly 1,800 terawatt hour. And the gap is roughly 1,380 or 1,500 terawatt hour additional capacity there, additional energy production, and that roughly the capacity install of 250 gigawatt additional capacity on top of the existing capacity. How much investment is that? We assume it's roughly $2 million for each megawatt. Then it's roughly $500 billion additional investment that is required exactly to supply electricity by 2060. And we are fully committed that the additional capacity is mostly coming from the renewable energy. And how PLN is going to do it? For one, sure, PLN is not going to do it alone. We're going to do this through collaborations in terms of technology, in terms of investment, in terms of policy. So here we are proudly to announce that we are open for new investment starting today until in the long future to ensure that the transition to low carbon economy is going to run very smooth. And here the plan of the phasing out of the fossil fuel plants. And in 2025, in the new national energy electricity planning, we are replacing the planning of coal and gas plant by renewable energy as a baseload in amount of 1.1 gigawatt. And then in 2030, we are planning retiring subcritical power plants, stage number 1 in amount of 1 gigawatt, and 2035, the second stage, subcritical 9 gigawatt, and 2040 retirement of the supercritical 10 gigawatt, and from 2045 until 2056 there will be retirement of our supercritical, and by 2060 we're going to reach carbon neutral. So in that regard, do we need some kind of policy? Yes, and the policy is actually transitioning to low carbon system. And we're going to do this with or without the law, because this is already a plan that already bestowed upon by PLN and direct order coming from the President Jokowi. And we are in the process of designing presidential regulation that exactly so that this plan is going to be executed in the long future. And this is the energy mix, and you can see from the scenario zero carbon to 2060. You see the black one is actually coming from the coal-fired power plants, is being phasing out by 2060. 56 is going to be replaced by the renewable energy, and we are actually today with the COVID-19 we are experiencing a little bit of oversupply, and with the system that experiencing oversupply, we of course some of the power plants that we are operating and also some of the power plants that owned and operated by our partner, independent power producer, also little bit underutilized. So in that regard, we're going to fix this problem by 2025 by actually reducing our costs and also increasing the demand in a much rapid fashion. And then also right now, and the production of oil is roughly 700,000 barrels per day, while the consumption of oil is 1.5 million barrels per day. And then in 10 years from today, the production of oil is going to be reduced roughly only 500,000 barrels a day, while the demand is going to increase to become 2.6 million barrels a day. So the transport sector is going to be based on the import fuel, and also the CO2 emission is for 1 liter of gasoline is roughly 2.4 kilogram of CO2. Shifting from oil-based transport to electric-based transport, meaning is shifting from foreign or import-based energy to become domestic-based energy, but in the same time also reducing the cost and also reducing the carbon emission. Hence, this is becoming the only way to move forward. How the transport sector is going to be reducing the CO2 emission. And in addition, with the electricity system is going to reach carbon neutral by 2060, then the transport sector that is going to be based on the electric transport is also going to be able to reduce CO2 emissions substantially. And also we are converting the LPG stove to induction stove, in meaning that also the LPG is mostly coming from import, and hence we also solving the import of energy and by replacing with the domestic-based energy, but in the same time also reducing the CO2 emissions. So in that regard, we are here fighting very hard, and we come up with the transitions, and we hope that the transition is going to run very smooth. And one way to move forward is that humankind innovate. Day by day, the price of renewable energy is decreasing, and today, for instance, the price of solar electricity is roughly only 3.6 cents per kilowatt hour. However, we have to admit the cost of the storage is still very expensive, roughly 13 or 14 cents per kilowatt hour. But in the future, we are very sure that the cost of storage energy system using the battery is going to be much cheaper. In that regard, we hope that renewable energy is going to come into our system not because of policy, but because the renewable energy is superior in terms of technical, in terms of commercial, hence it's going to come because it's the best choice. And in that regard, we show that we are going to be able to combat the climate change. So today, PLN, our main product is electricity, but in the future, our main job is to take care of the environment, while electricity is our byproduct. So thank you very much. I'm going to stop here.
Unmute me. Thank you so much, Pak Darmawan. We have time for questions, and let me start with, we have 4 or 5 or more questions. Let me start with Paul Sullivan. He's with the National Defense University and Johns Hopkins University. How have COVID issues slowed down any energy transitions in Indonesia? How is Indonesia deciding where the transition should happen, given how complex the geography and politics are for Indonesia? Any panelists, please.
Well, probably I could answer. Oh, okay.
Pak Satya, dipersilakan, Pak.
Okay, please. If you like to answer first, please.
Yes, please, Pak. Silakan, Pak.
Pak Satya, dipersilakan, Pak.
Oh, saya dulu. Okay, if you look at from the policy that we have at the moment, if you look at from what happened today with the COVID, of course, it's slowing down the process because of the demand is decreasing, and we anticipating for. But we do expect, if you look at the oil price at the moment is quite high, and coal price also high. If you look at China GDP at the moment, with the economic growth is around 6.5%, we are quite optimistic that the economic is running again. So we do hope that the process of the transition will be done according to our plan. Even though, like what I mentioned earlier, the difficulties what we have at the moment is the forecasting about the peak emissions, because we are aiming that we are able to calculate, where and what year that Indonesia is going to be considered a peak emissions, even though the best guess at the moment, they would need to be calculated accurately a peak emissions. By saying that, so the net zero emission could be forecast by 2050. So a lot of thing has to be done. To be honest, the PLN initiative is one of them, but as you may know that the emission is not only dominated by the energy sectors, but also from the forestry, from land use, and also from the industry. So all work hand in hand in order to reduce our emissions. And we also still consider that the fossil fuel is still exists with the very low carbon emissions. So that we are thinking about implementing the technology on the reducing carbon emission at the fossil fuels, by implementing the carbon capture and utilization storage is one option. So we like also to invite here in the USINDO forum that the US could participate, on the development of the technology in order to reduce the emission from the fossil fuel base. Even though in our strategy here, in order to reach the net zero emissions, we are minimizing the fossil fuel use, by replacing by renewables. But again, we still consider that fossil fuel is still there, even though in very low amount of number compared with the renewables in the future. I think that's my a little bit long answer, but it gets the question.
Unmute me. All right, thank you so much. We have a question from our board member.
Ambassador Merrill,
yes.
Let
Yes.
me add a bit.
Oh, yes, sir.
In
Please go ahead.
2015, the estimated demand growth was roughly 8.6%, while in the last 5 years, the actual demand growth was only roughly average 4.6%. Hence, and then there is a COVID-19, in which the demand growth is becoming minus roughly 2%. While the additional capacity coming from the 35 gigawatt power plants, the program was still based on the 8.6%. In that regard, today we are experiencing oversupply because of the estimated demand growth. There is a gap in addition of COVID-19. Pak Satya Yudha already answered the question. Of course, it's becoming a challenge. How are we going to be able to add additional capacity, whatever the capacity coming from renewable or fossil fuel in a system that having a lot of excess power? In that regard, Pak Dadan already answered the question somehow. We are doing some kind of firing. So we're not adding capacity, but still adding the portion of renewable energy. But also Pak Dadan also pointed it out in his presentations that we start the renewable energy development by replacing our diesel engines, in which the levelized cost of electricity per kilowatt hour is roughly 28 cents, with renewable energy base load, which is much cheaper. And there is plenty of diesel fuel, diesel engines that we are able to replace with renewable energy. So we start with the low-hanging fruits, in which we are identifying in which the energy is coming from import, very expensive, and we are replacing with renewable energy. So that's why we are very grateful with the guidance coming from the Ministry of Energy and Mining, in which the Director General is Pak Dr. Dadan Kusdiana. Thank you, Bapak.
Thank you. Thank you, Pak Darmawan. I have a question for any of the Indonesian panelists from Loki Koroyan, our USINDO board member. Is the attainment of the government's program for renewable energy development depending on the parliament's passing its planned bill on renewable energy into law this year?
May I answer, Pak?
Yes.
The carbon neutral plan is actually a discussion coming from the Ministry of Energy and Mining. And then also the new RUPTL, the National Electricity Planning, is going to be released in the next couple of weeks. It's already very green, in which the first time is a green RUPTL. And in the additional capacity, roughly 41 gigawatt between today until 2030, 44% is coming from renewable energy, while the 54% is actually already planned a long time ago and is already in the pipeline. And then we cannot stop it anymore, it's already contracted. And then the commissioning date is already there. And then also in the new RUPTL, there is a transitioning in which the planning of coal-fired power plants and gas-fired power plants will be replaced from 2025 to 2030 is going to be replaced with renewable energy baseload. In addition, there is a 2060 carbon neutral, meaning with or without the law, the plan is going to be carried out. And there is actually a commitment coming from the ministry and also from the PLN. And then also there is a direct order coming from the President of Jokowi. So meaning this is already established and we are doing it right now. So we're going to move forward. So that's why we are here to ask for more collaboration in terms of investment, in terms of technology assistance, and also kind of a policy. Thank you.
Can I add?
Ambassador?
Yes, please proceed. Any other comments?
Something?
Yes.
You know, at the moment, there are at least two proposals for the regulation with regard to the renewables energy. One is the bill of the renewable energies is going to be done by the parliaments. We hopefully they are working hard now to finalize. And the second one is like been mentioned earlier by me and also by Pak Dadan, that the presidential decree is quite important on the renewable energy, because of on that presidential decree it determines about the pricings. You see, because of the renewables energy in Indonesia is determined by the price issues at the moment. So if we are able to attract with a very good price, of course the investor will come, and it's going to accelerate the development of renewables energy in Indonesia. And as you may know that what Pak Darmawan is playing important role here, because of the PLN is the sole off-taker of the renewable energy. So if PLN able to cope with the renewable energy, that everything will be done. You see, because of the sole off-taker is done through PLN. I think this great thing, you know, from Pak Darmawan mentioned that there are plenty opportunity for PLN to reach out the renewables through the RUPTL, which is you know, National Electricity Planning, which is also been you know, because the National Energy Council been asked for the you know, considerations, you know, with regard to that plan, and we already submitted with all our concern. So hopefully it will be incorporated by the RUPTL that now has been discussed at the Ministry Office and the Ministry of Energy Office. And I do hope that the new RUPTL up to 2030, accommodating the whole energy spectrums, you know, and ask for transitioning from more renewables than fossil. So I think I agree with the more greener, you know, electricity generation in the future. Thank you.
Thank you. Question for any of the Indonesian panelists, anyone, I think. When will the presidential decree on renewable energy, when is it likely to be issued in your estimation?
Yeah, I think I have to answer this question.
Yeah.
Approved that regulation is being one package with RUPTL. So the process will be finalizing the RUPTL first, then by that document we'll discuss with the Ministry of Finance to get the approval on the tariff. And I think, yeah, we have very close communication with the Ministry of Finance. So once the RUPTL finish, then we will be finalizing the the presidential regulation.
Thank you.
Let me add a bit. the roadmap
Yes.
to carbon neutral 2060 already laid out, and the presidential regulations actually to ensure that the roadmap is not only a roadmap, but it's going to be executed, it's going to be legally binding, is still taking place right now. Pak Dadan actually playing a big role over in their regulations. And the coordinating minister of maritime and investment is taking a lead on that one. So in that regard, in terms of regulations, we are actually moving forward, very, very fast here. And I think I also want to point out the very interesting presentation coming from Dr. Kelly Gallagher, in which is a balancing act when it comes to policy. When we are using a lot of it in tariff, of course, the acceleration of the renewable energy development is very fast, but it's becoming a burden on the state budget here. So right here, like if you listen to the presentation coming from Pak Dadan, it's becoming basically it's a very smart strategy that somehow we going to get the mission accomplished, but we also manage the cost from the government side, in which we are start replacing with the very expensive electricity with a cheaper one, and also renewable energy. But in the future, as we humankind innovate and renewable energy becoming very competitive, then we start putting a huge amount of renewable energy into the system. Is not because of only because of policy, but also because of renewable energy is becoming superior in terms of technical, in terms of commercial. Hence, that's the only way that we're going to move forward. Thank you.
Thank you, panelists. One or two more questions. This is from an Indonesian, Pak Haryadi. Dear distinguished speakers, how do you see the possible real impact the job creation omnibus law may trigger to speed up renewable energy development to achieve the objective? I suppose in terms of investment, but or other factors. Who would like to take that one?
Yes, I think this is clear, yeah, that regulation provide us much more easier in terms of investment. So by this regulation, the government providing, for example, one single submission for investment. And the permit also, the permit will be based on the risk. So this is not that this project or this sector has to have the permit, but this is up to the consideration in terms of the risk. So for example, for geothermal for electricity, then it will be based on the permit going to the Ministry of Energy through the Ministry of Investment. But for direct use, because we consider that the risk is less, is low, then it can do directly, just reporting to the government. By this, I think it will open more opportunity for investment as well as for the job creation.
Thank you.
Ambassador Merrill?
Yes, sir.
If you look at the energy mix in China in 2001, coal was only roughly 50%. And if you look at the energy mix in China in 2009, it's roughly 80-something%. Definitely during that period, China emphasizing on growth, but not environmental sustainability, because the additional of coal at that time is very quick. But in the same time, China, with a very cheap energy, dominating the market, the production of wind, dominating the production of solar. Hence, at that time, they are building capacity, national capacity, so they're going to be able to dominate the international renewable energy market. And that's how China is becoming dominating factor in renewable energy today, producing the cheapest solar panel, the cheapest form of battery, something. And in Indonesia today, 300 terawatt hour, 2060 becoming 1,800 terawatt hour, additional investment is roughly $500 billion. The question is whether this $500 billion investment is coming from import, in which Indonesia is only the object, or Indonesia is able, in a very quick manner, to develop the national capacity in which the local content is very high, the job creation is going to take place and is going to accelerate growth. And that going to be determined by Indonesian in coming up with the right policy. We, of course, want to collaborate here, but during the collaboration, there is national capacity, there is a transfer of technology. In that regard, Indonesia is able to accelerate growth and then also to give prosperity to the people. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, I think I can go back to the omnibus law too. Because of if you look at the intentions to produce the omnibus law is to make the ease of doing business in Indonesia better. You see, easier. So if you are able to create the ease of doing business in Indonesia, so the renewables energy is one of the potential to be developed in Indonesia. It creates a lot of things, like been mentioned earlier, that the local content, the human resources, the investment from the banking standpoint, technology, and also the policy developments. I think if we could be able to develop hands in hands together with the issuing of the omnibus, I do believe that the renewable energy will create a potential investments in the future that may create a job and also make improve the knowledge, because of kind of cooperations between developed country like US and Indonesia. So if you look at the resources, David, you need the potential resources on renewables in Indonesia is plenty and very huge. So there is a gap, from the install capacity at the moment and the resources what we do have. So there are gaps that could be fulfilled with all the investment that will be coming in the future. And we do hope with the omnibus law would create the investment friendly, basically.
Thank you. Kelly Gallagher. Kelly, would you like an opportunity to add on the points on China or other points at this time?
I was thinking that I would make one comment. I've spent a lot of time studying China over the years, and particularly the development of the renewable energy industry in China. And I think one factor that's been mentioned, but maybe not as explicitly, is the availability of finance that was crucial to the success of Chinese manufacturers to be able to develop this industry. Yeah. And I think that's, something that Indonesia should consider is what climate finance or green finance policies it wants to put in place to make sure that capital is available to those private sector actors who want to, create new industries, create new companies, participate in the market. In China, of course, the China Development Bank was a extremely important policy tool that was used, but a lot of capital was made available because certain types of investment were green lighted for all renewable and clean energy and electric vehicle industries as a matter of industrial policy. And that made the interest rates cheaper. So really there was a surplus of capital that was available to Chinese manufacturers that allowed them to develop this strength over time. And then of course, to export their technology as well. So I think there's some important lessons that not only Indonesia, United States should also take from this experience in terms of making capital available for the clean, green, renewable energy industries.
Yeah, that's very true.
All right. We have one or two more questions. This is Rebecca Purva from Columbia University. She has two questions. I'll ask them one by one because it's complicated to do both at once. First one, since Indonesia is the largest archipelago, how do we ensure that renewable energies such as solar and wind are distributed equally, especially to those unreached, to which I would add, are we sure we really want to distribute them equally? Maybe there's some reason not to distribute them equally in view of the geography. Who would like to tackle that?
Yeah, I like to.
Well,
Well, I think we are not taking the word of equally, but rather than we will optimize the potential combining with the demand. For example, we have more wind project in Sulawesi, but we don't have any single project yet in terms of wind in Sumatra, but we put more project on hydro in Sumatra and also the geothermal. So I think what we do now is to optimize the locally available renewable energy resources and try to put with the demand at that location also before we are developing the grid. Yeah.
I think this is important, Ambassador Merrill. You know, just been mentioned by Pak Dadan. The local resources is quite important. If you look at the geographically, Indonesia consists of thousand islands. So we like, because of National Energy Council being asked by the ministry, to review the RUPTL. One of the input that we give, to consider heavily with the local resources. So one island that may have plenty resources there may have geothermal, they have potential for wind and also solar, and which one that we will come first? This is the question to the ministry at that time. So because we need them to really calculate which that can be potentially developed first. Yeah, this is become our concern, and we do hope, and the next the RUPTL, which has been mentioned by Darmawan, is more greener with the consideration of the local, more on the local resources. By saying that, Ambassador Merrill, sometimes it's quite difficult to to everything to be operated by PLN, because PLN is state-owned enterprise, which is, according to law, that state-owned enterprise, it has to be make a profit. While if you look at from the constitutional standpoint, the Indonesian constitutional standpoint, there is a right of the state to electrify the community wherever they are. In the small town, in the small island, and the very isolated island, there is a right for the government to give an electricity to them. So this is kind of difficult, to manage, because we know that PLN is state-owned enterprise, but there is a public obligations to be fulfilled by the company like PLN. So a lot of been discussed, within the National Energy Council with that regards. So we do hope that we will produce the right policy, in order to electrify the island, the remote island, which is probably occupied just only a very small community. If you look at from the business standpoint, it may not be giving any profit, but again, the government should give them electricity. So that is quite unique, and I do agree with what Dr. Kelly questioned. This is something unique in Indonesia, particularly with all those islands, the remote one, the isolated one.
Sure. I mean, I would expect that the government wants to give electricity to people, but not necessarily committed to give the same type of electrical generating sources equally. It depends on the localities' advantages and disadvantages.
Yeah.
The second part, now this is new for me. Many countries are investing in green hydrogen. It's more expensive, but much more reliable than solar and wind. Would this be a smart investment for Indonesia long term? If not, why?
I think I will try to answer, then I think Pak Darmawan will be continuing. for us, I mean, in the ministry, since the word of green hydrogen is hydrogen that coming from the renewable energy. So the first is that we have to promote renewable energy. Once we are in such conditions, green hydrogen energy cannot be developed. So what I would like to say that we would like to push to develop renewable energy. Then once we can fulfill all the need here for the electricity, for example, then we'll go for the green energy. I think that's the one that I can answer, Ambassador.
That's all we should allow for in order to end on time. I want to thank really and genuinely all the participants. I think we got a great balance of participants, international and domestic, on this issue. I think we had great attendance and some great questions. And I hope this has informed our audience better so that they can be in a position to understand and hopefully be supportive of the two governments and the two governments' efforts to come to some common goals and solutions on renewable energy, which is increasing week by week in a separate channel. So if you have any comments at the end, any of the speakers, I welcome them. And if not, I thank everyone for participating in this important call.